Welcome to the Feral Tarot,
a podcast where we talk about psychology, the occult, magic, and the weirdness that is existence through the lens of the tarot.
Today we're taking a departure from our usual format to talk a little bit about what tarot actually is, how we use it, and how the two of us got here in your ear holes.
We'll dig into the suits and their elements, touch on the numerology of the small cards, the big ideas that are the Major Arcana, and the universal filing cabinet we use to organize these ideas.
And once again, we are learning right along with you. We started this as an ongoing chat to get better acquainted with these concepts and with each other. So we would love to hear your thoughts. Please feel free to drop us a line at theferaltarotpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Instagram or Blue Sky. We're out there.
Seriously, I need your validation.
They really do.
That said, before we kick off the episode, we'd like to acknowledge, as always, that the Feral Tarot is recorded on stolen Ohlone land, and we want to offer our respect and gratitude to the Ohlone elders, past and present.
And as we navigate the wisdom of the tarot, we also recognize the ways this system has been influenced by themes of imperialism, patriarchy, and domination through its time in the Age of Osiris.
With that, let's get into what the fuck even is tarot.
What the fuck? How we looking?
We're looking good so far. Let me see if I can't...
I still think it's because we didn't give an offering to the box.
Probably. We didn't offer to the box, but we're good now.
All right. Well, what we were talking about before we started recording was a little bit of the history of the tarot and what the fuck is tarot. And how ultimately it's a deck of cards.
Yeah, it is a deck of cards. It's got a debated history. Some people say it's thousands of years old. Some say it's 100 years old. Empirical history seems to tell us that it's a few hundred years old, but there's a vast mythos behind that, suggesting that it's much older, given to the ancient Egyptians by Thoth.
So the Rider-Waite is the classic imagery, and then the Thoth is kind of its own deck. Does the Rider-Waite predate the Thoth imagery?
Yeah, no, the Thoth deck imagery that we have is developed by Crowley and Frida Lady Harris. And the Rider-Waite deck is traditional to a degree with the trumps. With the small cards, it seems like they used their own kind of inner knowledge to influence those. I'm not positive, because a lot of the times we see the small cards in other decks, they're just arrangements of the tool that it's representing.
Yeah, so the minor arcana in the tarot is what went on to influence the pretty much modern playing card deck that we think of.
Totally. I believe, if I have my correspondences correct, the clubs are wands, the diamonds are pentacles, the hearts are cups, and the spades would then be swords. But yeah, tarot itself had that influenced by a Egyptian game called Mamluk, which had the four suits that we know in the tarot: the cups, swords, wands, and discs.
Mm-hmm. So I think what's most interesting about the tarot is that it has not just like the minor cards, but then also the trump cards. The arcana are the mysteries. So the trump is the kind of large cards that are large life paths or forces. So in this podcast, we're going through the major arcanas, kind of guided by the Fool's Journey. So we're starting with those and then also pulling from the minor cards as a random pull. So we're sort of bouncing back and forth between these large life influences and The minor arcana, the small mysteries, are again kind of mirrored in this playing card deck of the elements, and 1 through 10 being its own kind of like mini journey through those influences.
And yeah, it actually brings up a good segue for why is it 1 through 10, and why are there 22 of the trump cards? At least from our perspective, being like a hermetic informed one, that lines up with the Kabbalah, right?
Yeah, can you say more about that?
Yeah, totally. So the major cards represent, as you said, the major arcana, the major mysteries in life, are paths that we take between the spheres of the tree of life. We might do a whole episode on Kabbalah, but it's a very deep subject. We're talking about like the universal filing cabinet here. There's a lot of different ways to explain that, and it's also worth noting that the version that we're working with is heavily informed by Christianity and based in not necessarily a misinterpretation, but not a totally complete interpretation of the actual Jewish Kabbalah. But yeah, so there's 10 spheres in the Tree of Life, and there's 22 different paths between those. So each of those cards represent a path between spheres. So for example, like one of my favorites, we're definitely going to have an episode of it coming up in a couple here. The path of Gimel, the high priestess, is the longest tree on the path, and that connects Keter directly to Tiferet. So the first iteration of being linked up to the sixth sphere.
And then again, for any of our listeners who aren't intimately familiar with Kabbalah or the Tree of Life, don't worry about it too much. But yeah, I think filing cabinet of the universe is a good way to think about it, from like the broadest sense of, if you could think of everything that exists, all life experiences between birth and death and everything in between, the known and the unknown, linking up together. That's kind of what Kabbalah seeks to organize. So the tarot, or one way of thinking of tarot, is how do we personify and put material image to those experiences and realities. So what Nemo's referencing with the High Priestess, that is one card that, in this example, is often associated with intuition, with deep knowing, with kind of the unseen. And in Kabbalah, that pathway is linking kind of divine, undifferentiated consciousness with Tifereth being like the heart center with compassion.
Yeah, the consolidation of all of the other paths in the tree too. So it's kind of a reflection of that the premium mobile, so to speak. Yeah, and you'd mentioned earlier, don't stress about the Kabbalah. I want to double emphasize that. I feel like, if anything, the Kabbalah has made tarot way more complicated for me to like just read. So like if you are new to tarot, ignore this until you're like ready to come back around to it. I think it's more constructive to just develop a intuitive relationship with the cards right off the bat.
On that note, I think since both of us kind of met through our interest in Kabbalah, we could talk a little bit about how we each got into tarot, because I think we did not start, jumping in the deep end. I think it starts for many people with just like a basic curiosity and interest and kind of like, oh, what is this? Like for me, I have my first deck that I bought with my Barnes and Noble gift card in like middle school, from 2006. And it's just like a tiny little pocket Rider-Waite deck. And yeah, I was just like, curiosity was probably like in the checkout line or whatever could fit on my gift card. And yeah, I just had that out of curiosity, and I was intrigued by, the symbolism, and I was always kind of a Pisces child interested in dreams and art and things. So that was my, entryway. And then I think it kind of lay fallow until I got, my own kind of more unique deck with the marigolds, probably like 10 years later. And again, just kind of like re-picked up looking at the symbolism and the interest in magic. So I didn't find Kabbalah until a bit later. How did you land in tarot?
We can get into that. I want to know first, though, what was your first exposure to tarot? Like, before you decided to get your pack, did you have any, like, impression of it from anywhere?
I don't know if I did. I think seeing it out and about might have been my first. Like I said, I was kind of like a magical child of, interested in like fairies and dragons and, little magical shops. But it was not something that like, I grew up Catholic. Like, I don't think I had any sort of like exposure to it beyond just kind of seeing little bits out in the world and having that sense of intrigue. Did you have a alternate way that you came across it?
Yeah, my first exposure was one of my aunts. She's kind of a witch to some degree. She refers to herself as a psychic, which a little eye roll there, but like she taught me quite a bit. But yeah, she had a deck, and I saw her giving one of my aunts a reading at some point. And I remember I wasn't allowed to look at the deck because they thought that I would be like I asked why, and they're like, well, there's some cards in there that like you might not want to like pull. Like they thought I'd be like afraid of the death card, and like the card that the deck that they used was the Robin Wood Tarot, which has like some titties in it, and like yeah, well, that was probably about it for it. But I remember that, and then that was about it for a while. And then years later, I met a girl right after high school, and she was a poet, and just like I was totally like enthralled with, yeah, super smitten with this person. She was totally novel kind of experience, like the first like kind of intellectual person I met out. Like there weren't like that many at my school who were like into art and other weird stuff or like read books outside of the reading list. But anyway, I met this person, and she kind of told me a little bit more about the tarot and astrology at the same time. So like, that kind of piqued my interest, like to have a shared language with her, and also to like, because it was interesting as fuck. I was like definitely intrigued by what I was learning about it. Yeah, so that was my like initial kind of getting back into the tarot as a young adult. From there, I like started doing some like readings on the rave scene. Like there was a couple of raves where I like just brought the tarot deck that I had, which was like a color your own tarot deck, which I never completed coloring. So there were a bunch of blank, or not blank, but just like black and white cards in there.
Do you still have that deck?
No, I don't know what happened to it, but
it's in the wind now.
Yeah. But yeah, years later, I kind of developed an interest in like magic and the occult, and astrology and tarot are kind of inherently linked into that. It's kind of a initial thing that you start off with, and yeah, it's kind of developed from there. I didn't have the Kabbalah involved into it until that point, but I was really into conspiracy theory back in the day before it was like cool and like all the racists got into it, when it was just, fun Illuminati stuff. And I was like, my logic at the time was like, well, this is what they're using, then I'm going to use the weapons of my enemy. And yeah.
Well, all the like kings and emperors of yore had their court astrologer to read the stars for them. So like, don't think that you think Elon Musk doesn't have a personal astrologer. Like, I don't know, man. Like there's some truth to that.
Maybe, yeah. Well, he's into I forgot what the guy's name is, but he has like some occult influence. There's this I wish I knew the name, but there's this whole like techno dark age that people are trying to bring in. I forget who the influence in that was, but there's like some deep occult shit in there.
Hell yeah. For those with eyes to see.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, my initial intention wasn't necessarily so far out there. Anyway, yeah, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit about my journey with it without really getting to a solid nexus point. But that's pretty much it. Yeah, I got into the Thoth deck years later. After getting over my fear of witchcraft, I had to get over a fear of Aleister Crowley.
I think many people have to get over a fear of Aleister Crowley. That was when I first found kind of magical community and started doing more tarot study in earnest. That was a big thing of like, tarot's like really full of, information, and it's this great tool, and also Aleister Crowley, and like, don't get scared. He's kind of a dick, but it had some brilliant ideas. So yeah, I don't know if we want to say just we could probably do a whole episode just on Crowley. Maybe we'll touch on it more in our Kabbalah episode.
Yeah, we'll probably have some
complex guy.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's worth doing a couple offshoot episodes about like Thelema and Crowley and like more about magic in general and Kabbalah, but just because it's pertinent to our interests, and I think like, as much as this is a tarot podcast, like the reason we're doing tarot is because of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that is high weirdness through the lens of the tarot.
High weirdness, indeed. Yeah, and I think actually this maybe is a good segue. So one way of approaching the tarot, again, we talked about the human experience is guided by these mysteries between birth and death and the known and the unknown, and how do we relate to our experiences. And some people read the cards with reversals. And that means that, well, my interpretation of the reversal is you pull a card out and it has a symbol on it. It's, let's say, the High Priestess, since we were talking about that. And maybe you're asking for guidance about something in your life. And you pull the High Priestess, but it's reversed. Some people might interpret the reversal as its own kind of reading of the card, and sometimes that's like a negative quote unquote reading. So like something about that card is blocked or reversed. Some people don't read reversals, but it's basically a way of kind of seeing like, how is this, if we're thinking of the High Priestess as intuition, maybe that's indicating that your intuition is blocked or you haven't been listening to your intuition. Crowley is standing on my laptop. Complicated character. Not everyone reads them that way. Some people read the cards holistically, where obviously if you have an internal sense of what's going on in your life, you might realize if you pull that card like, oh yeah, that's something I should be paying attention to more. Or something like that. In the Thoth deck, I think the way I learned it was because the imagery is slightly different, you don't really need to read reversals. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit in the Magus episode too. I think that indeed the Thoth deck is a lot more, like you said, holistic. And, you have cards like the Ten of Wands, which is our next episode, Oppression. Like, not too much sunny about that one. Though the Rider-Waite deck isn't really a sunny card where that one's concerned either. It's someone who's, like, overburdened by a bunch of...
heavy wands.
Heavy wands they're trying to carry. I think, depending on the deck that you're using, reversals can be helpful. Like, if you're doing the Rider-Waite, maybe it is helpful to... see a reversal if you're looking for an outcome of something, but it really depends on your history with it. Like you said, if you're more acquainted with them as a holistic thing, maybe you're just trying to keep your eyes open for that pattern, that key's kind of signature on the experience. That said, I don't do a ton of reading with tarot. The way I tend to use them is kind of, I do like reading in a sense, but I kind of pull a daily card to see like what should I keep my eyes open for, like what is today's kind of theme.
Yeah.
And then I also apply that to a broader sense with a card that I like carry around in my phone until it feels like that card's like kind of that chapter's ended. Mm-hmm. But other than that, yeah, I don't interpret things as reading. I don't ask questions from the deck too much. Every once in a while, I'll kind of like see what it thinks about a situation, but making the narrative out of them has always been a little difficult for me. What about you? Do you tend to do readings or?
I did. I was doing readings for a while. I hadn't done them for other people for a while, so it felt like a big. It feels very like vulnerable to me to read for someone else because I had learned how to do it for myself, and I think I felt weird about that for a while, and then I think I met other people who also were like, "No, this is a personal tool." They don't have any desire to kind of read for other people, and then. Obviously, there are people who, do that for a living, and like that is kind of their tool of choice to provide guidance for people. So I've done both. I think of it mostly as a personal tool. I haven't done a lot of readings for myself recently. I pulled some cards this morning just out of curiosity. I think once you become really familiar with the symbols and are kind of familiar with like yourself, I think of tarot as like a tool for like self-knowledge. Mm-hmm. A lot of times doing readings will feel like you're just getting called out. You're just getting called out by a deck of cards.
Yeah.
Which like at the beginning of a tarot journey, at least for me, you're like, wow, like the magic is real. Like, how does it know? But like then eventually you're sort of like, fuck, like, yeah, I do know that. Yeah, I should be, focusing on something different, or like, yeah, I know, like,
yeah,
I know I feel stuck or whatever. And sometimes like it is demoralizing in that way. And sometimes it's uplifting because it reminds you of maybe of like I pulled, I think it was like 8 of Swords, which is something about confinement and feeling stuck, but it was reversed. So it's like, yeah, okay. Like I am sort of starting to move out of like a stuck feeling that I've been feeling. So it's good as like a reminder for like what you already know. And I think like that's also what's gratifying. If you do read for other people, there's that level of like, well, there's no way that I should know this about someone else's situation. So the fact that I was able to pull cards and read them or, to interpret them in a way that resonated for this other person whose situation I don't know about as intimately as I might know my own situation, that's what feels a little extra like, woo, like that's kind of where you get into tarot as a tool for not just personal consciousness, but like collective consciousness, that these are symbols that transcend the individual and are about like a universal human experience. Mm-hmm. So that was really gratifying when I did read for other people. It felt like kind of an edge. But to have people be like, oh my God, this brought me to tears. I'm like, oh my God. Or people be like, yes, like, yeah, I really like it. It reminded me of what I needed to know, was pretty powerful. So yeah, it's a really interesting tool, I think, for both directions.
Absolutely. I think that's really what's kept me with it, is how deep that symbolism is. Like regardless of if you think they're like magic cards or like if they're just from a card game that got, turned around into a mystical tool. Like there's something about the imagery in these cards that's like deeply archetypical and relates to people on a unconscious level. Like my partner Georgia is more of a self-guided magical practitioner witch, and they have like just their personal interpretation of the cards. They don't know anything about Kabbalah. They don't really get into the elements that much with it. I think they do get into elements with it a little bit more. Anyway, their journey with the tarot is mostly like self-guided, and it's really cool to like be talking with them about a specific card, and I am talking about the Kabbalah of it, and I'm keeping that in mind as with part of my interpretation. And then they'll say something which at first glance is like not super resonant or not like immediately related, but then after like taking a couple of steps of thought, you can see, oh no, this does indeed like fall under that big vast umbrella that each of those like cards encompass. So yeah, I think there's something deeply archetypical that like has a shared truth for most people. And I think, that comes through. And I did want to talk about too, like, my experience with reading for other people has been very much the same, where I'm like just kind of surprised like at how much I was able to interpret. I like to ask people about their situation so that I can like be informed when I'm talking about like what I'm getting out of the cards. But there have been like several times where I did a reading for someone else and I was like, so this card's telling me, for example, like, I don't remember what the card is, but I remember I was doing a reading like for a couple and I was like, so like, I'm going to say it right now, like one person's not getting what they need out of this and like the other person is getting everything that they need. And like one of them just like started crying and I was like, oh fuck, I just started a big thing for them.
You brought it into consciousness. Yeah. Is what I think the thing is, whether it's personal or for other people, you're bringing into words, into consciousness through the imagery and the archetypes, something that was previously perhaps not known.
Yeah, absolutely. And
then it becomes more real and you have to actually like grapple with it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, like maybe what is scary about it and why it has like, if for people who are kind of like magic averse or like, I don't know, some people probably are apathetic to tarot. Some people have, like in your childhood where it was like, oh, you're going to be afraid. Like, I think that is at the core of what might be frightening about it, is that it brings things into the light through the symbolism and through the language that you might not have wanted to grasp or been able to before.
Totally. Yeah, there's a reason why the mind keeps those things in the dark, and unless you're prepared to shine a light on those things and see what those little monsters are creeping around in the shadows, you might prefer to walk without it. Something I did want to talk about though before we like get back into our personal experiences and with the cards, were some of the elements. The cards are really based around elements, and I think for a lot of our audience, if they don't have experience with magic in general, like, what are these elements? How do they relate to the tarot? We've got the wands are fire, swords, we've got air, we've got cups for water, and discs or pentacles for earth. And then I believe, I don't know if it's Wicca specifically or some other traditions, but they mix or they swap the swords and swords being fire because they're like iron and forged in fire, and then wands are air because they like
go through the air.
The air. Fits. We tend to use fire for wands and air for swords, but for someone who doesn't have any kind of like frame of reference for these elements, like what are they? Like what does fire mean?
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember a moment, I think it was like I was rediscovering tarot. I was like a roundabout way to answer this question, but and I was like, oh yeah, this was the first thing I was trying to like jog my memory of. Like, I remember there are elements. I remember there's 4 of them, and they're like these basic like overarching ways that the suits are organized, the minor arcana. And I remembered, I was like, yeah, water is cups, that makes sense. Pentacles is earth, that makes sense because like money and like metal. And I was like, I'm pretty sure swords are air, that makes sense. And I couldn't remember the last one. I don't know if I couldn't remember. I was like, maybe it was swords and clubs I had mixed up. Maybe I couldn't remember, but I couldn't remember what fire symbolized. It was like the last one, and I was like, what is it? And it was interesting when I finally like looked it up or remembered that like fire is kind of I would think of as like the primary element through which the others then descend. And it's kind of primal drive and creativity and will. And I was like, God damn, that would be the one I forget. Like, as you kind of come back to a magical path and your own like will, it's like, wow, like that is literally, I think of what you're remembering is like the primal drive and will. So that's a roundabout way to say like, yeah, that's what I associate with fire and wands, is that initial spark that then informs the rest of the elements, which I think we touched on in a previous episode of kind of, again, if we think of the filing cabinet of the universe, and I guess in like this is kind of a good segue into thinking of the tarot cards again as that kind of way of organizing human reality. The elements are like the various like lenses through which experience descends. So if we have initially fire as that's first spark, you have kind of just like a spark of an idea or a desire, and then that becomes an idea of the air of wand or of swords. So you have the idea. Swords are the mind, air. When we think of the age of Aquarius, Aquarius is an air sign, even though I always thought of it as a water sign before I studied astrology. Aquarius is air, the mind. We're in this age of, digital ideas, and things can kind of move very quickly through the air, electrical impulses. So swords are air, the mind, ideas, and then you sort of become like, okay, well, what is an idea in the body? And then you get to emotions and water and intuition. And I think of it as kind of like something can move through the air, and then the way it kind of refracts when it moves through the water is kind of when you get into cups. And it's a little bit wavy, it's a little bit slower, it's a little bit soupier. Cups is about like emotions and art and intuition. And it's kind of, you're getting more into like an embodied, but not quite tangible experience. And then cups is, or not cups, discs is pentacles and earth, where you actually get into like the meat of the body and the meat of physicality of the earth, of all of that entails money and any earthly experience that you could really think of is kind of encompassed in having to grapple with like that material.
Totally. Yeah. Hence them also being coins in some decks. And then I think pentacles being that disc that the magician uses to represent Earth, which back when magic was kind of having its renaissance in the Middle Ages, they thought the world was flat. So the pentacle on their altar is like literally supposed to be an earth. Yeah. Which I wonder if that means we need to update the pentacles to globes.
Oh.
Nah.
Or like balls, like the magician could be juggling.
Well, he used to be called the juggler.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Le Bâtonnier or something. I forgot.
Okay.
My French is atrocious. But yeah, it used to be someone juggling batons.
So that was my rambly thing about the elements. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put them. I think it's also fun to think about sometimes, like, why are they representations of that element? It kind of touched on with the discs. You know, it represents the Earth being round and representative of coins. It's a circle for Saturn, kind of the limitations of Malkuth. Water and cups, that's kind of obvious. It's a vessel that can hold cups. I think it's also worth thinking about like how water is receptive and like a cup is receptive. Like you can program water, like water has a memory to it. A little interesting bit there with mem being the Hebrew letter for water, and m it literally means water, and it's also representative of the element of water in the Western esoteric system. We have the swords, which I like to... This one's a fun little roundabout for me. I like to think about them as like cutting things apart, like how thought tends to sort of cut things down and dissect them.
Yeah, I have the same association with swords and cutting, and
Nice.
kind of the tendency of the mind to cut into categories, create boundaries. Yeah.
Totally. And then wands eludes me a little bit, but I think it has a lot to do with how it's not just literal fire, but it is like directed will, kind of represents will, and the wand is sort of a tool to direct something metaphysical with like a physical representation. I suppose also like we could think about wands as like something that you use to make fire if you're rubbing two wands together. Like a wand is just a stick, basically. A nice stick.
Just a nice stick.
It's just a nice stick.
Did you see Crowley's addition to our doc?
No, what's he doing?
Just when he stood on the keyboard.
He walked across it. The... So aside from like, I guess, reading cards, how else do you use them? We talked a little bit about how I kind of do my like daily card and my like
carrying
card, my
one.
carry card. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people use them for like storytelling and things like that. Do you have any other ways that you've used them that you'd like to share?
I mean, I think when I started, I was doing daily pulls, and I think that's like a really good habit for learning, just like getting familiar with the symbolism, is doing a daily pull. And like the practice that I started with, kind of encouraged thinking of the, basically looking for rhymes and, pulling a card and trying to see like, where is the symbolism showing up today? And that as a way of building associations. So if I pull, let's see, actually I can just think of an example. I think once I pulled, I think it was Princess of Cups when I was first starting studying the Thoth. And Princess is kind of the lowest of the court cards, the most material, the most like earthly. And Cups being about water and emotions. And I can't remember exactly what was happening that day, but I had what felt like a very tangible moment of putting a pan in the stove. And when you're putting hot water in a pan, you're supposed to, like a water bath, you're supposed to do it before you put it in the oven. But I was like, I forgot. And I poured water into the pan in the oven, which you're not supposed to do because it affects the glass, and the temperature change is too much for a lot of glass, and it shattered. Ooh. And my oven was filled with broken glass. And I was like, fuck, Princess of and of course there were, I'm sure, like, I think at the time I was doing more reflecting, and there was probably some sort of internal experience that I probably could have found meaning in, but it felt like a very tangible, like, this is literally like broken glass. Like, it's a broken vessel. It is like a final dissolution of like a vessel that contained water. So who knows what I was going through at the time.
Sometimes they are like right on. Like,
yeah.
I had it was just the other day I pulled the disappointment card, and I had just started a new job, so I was initially having a lot of like, ooh, it's exciting, like new job feeling, but I was like, disappointment card day, I started being like, this could be like more fun, like this could have more to it. And then let's see, that I'm looking at my journal right now because it was like just something that was like, so like, boom, there's disappointment for you. This is stupid. But it was like just a nice thing. So this was already after I'd like reflected on like, oh yeah, I'm starting to feel like maybe some disappointment with this job. Like, there were a few other things that I'd like felt some initial disappointment with, but so I like the show White Lotus. Do you watch at all? Okay. So if anyone listening to this watches the show, you're equally disappointed with the fact that the new theme song is no longer the wee woo one that we all loved. There's like this sample, and it's like sounds really cool, but it's not in this one. So Georgia's roommate we've been watching the show together, and she like syncs the old theme song with the new like credits. I was watching on my own the other night when I pulled this card, and I was like trying to do it myself. And like, first shot didn't go through. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I was watching the wrong episode anyway, because I hadn't been watching over here. I'd been watching at their place. So I'm like, cool, new opportunity, start a new episode. And then I got it. It was like right on. I was like into it. I was starting to watch the show, and then the video that I was playing it on for the theme song started buffering, and it went out of sync again. So I was just like, damn, that is disappointment,
Yep.
just like straight up. But yeah, so all that to say, sometimes they are like on the nose, and like the writing's really bad.
Yeah. So I think like that's a perfect example of like the mirroring, and the way that kind of tarot can like make you aware of things where like maybe you wouldn't fully embrace and pass over. And is that Princess
This is
of Cups?
Princess of Cups. This
That's
was my
for
card for
disappointment?
Friday. No,
Oh,
this
you just had it.
this was
Wait,
this
can I
Friday.
see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the Thoth deck, Princess of Cups. She literally looks like broken glass. Like she has like a flared out skirt with a bunch of kind of little crystals, and it was Pyrex, so it didn't like it breaks into little crystals.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's fascinating. So Nemo had just pulled the Princess of Cups.
It was just the card that I had for my journal on Friday.
Beautiful.
And,
So the mirroring kind of like the universe is fractal and holographic. So we have all these like little spirals out of here we go again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so daily pulls are a really good way to use it, whether you're just learning it or getting back into it or a seasoned tarot enthusiast. Sometimes I'll do like I think 3 cards just feels like a really good number for me.
I do 3 card too. Yeah. I do like a past, present,
Yep.
future kind of thing, or like what brought me to this situation, where I am now, where can it go? Kind of thing.
That latter one is like what I really like of like, okay, like kind of the current energy reading, the weather. And then like a little bit more, and then like, okay, where's this going?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more of like you kind of do get a narrative, like you're talking about storytelling and narrative, like you do with more than one card, kind of start to get like a picture, like an arc, I guess I would say, of both like current energy and then like where's this going, and then based on like we've sort of touched on this, but like the major and the minor arcana, like pulling disappointment is a small card. Which one was that?
Disappointment is, I think it's a cups. Oh, it's the 5 of cups.
Yeah. So the 5s are, I guess we haven't talked about numerology yet, but the 5s are like kind of a conflict point, I think, in all of the suits. So, it's disappointment. It's 5 of cups. It's kind of like, but you didn't pull death, like death, or the like if we were to just name some of the like the scary cards, like
death, oppression,
the tarot, or sorry, the tower.
Oh, the tower.
The tower is, I think, more people sleep on the tower, but it's more upheaval than death.
That
like
scares
death,
me way more than the death card.
Death card is like, oh, it's nice. Like I'm gonna have like a really relaxing, like something's gonna come to a gentle close, or like I'll be free of some sort of suffering. The tower is like, girl, get ready.
See this coming.
Get ready.
It
Buckle the
matter.
fuck up. Like batten the hatches. So yeah, that's some kind of one way to think of the major and the minor again, is like how big of a bump, or what does the road ahead look like? What is the weather that you can kind of anticipate? And I think that's another way. Like I am being very kind of like hyper aware in my language, because I think there's this idea of tarot as like divination is like telling the future. And I think it's like more useful to see tarot as like co-creating the future, because it's like a tool to kind of like see the weather and then decide, how you feel about it, what you want to do about it, rather than just being like, well, shit's fucked.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Better not go outside.
Totally. This is like more of a, like there's going to be a storm coming versus like you're going to die in a storm.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure there are practitioners of tarot who would be like, no, I can tell you based on cards you're going to die in a storm. But like,
that's the psychic kind of like whether you believe that, walk that path or not.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I tend to look at it very much as like, this is what could happen. This is like what the theme of this saga you're going through is. And yeah, like you said, it's a co-creation of the future. You can take that knowledge and, change that path. Or maybe we're just trying to be really optimistic and grasp onto some sense of control.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally view it that way. Like we touched briefly on magititis.
Magicitis.
Magicitis.
Magititis. I like that one too.
Magititis is like, because I think of itis as like the medical, like it's an irritation. So it's like you have like an inflammation in your mage part. But this idea of like kind of like the inflated ego that you can get through magic, but being like, wow, like I can actually like have agency over my life and my destiny, but like also, how much of that is real, some of it, and also some of it is like no amount of tarot cards is going to fully let you decide what happens, and like other people are their own whole universes out there. So,
and if it's a tower card, you definitely don't get to have any say in what happens.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about the numerology, since we kind of touched on that. We touched on the Kabbalah a little bit, on how we talked about 1 and 6 connecting that premium mobile with kind of how everything's connected down further into the soul. But I guess let's start with like the tarot of like the practical tarot of it, and maybe we'll see if we have time for like getting into the spheres a little bit more. But the aces represent 1, that premium mobile that I was talking about. We got the 2s, which represent the second manifestation. These numbers are going to be very easy to follow.
Duality, binaries, choice,
Chaos.
Okay.
Well, in the thelemic tree of life, the god form associated with it is chaos.
Okay. That makes sense with binaries.
Yeah, it's just kind of swirling, going back and forth, like, and then 3, be not understanding, gives it form, and there's finally a cohesive like connection. It's the first,
3 is kind of
form.
manifestation and creation, I think of as a 3.
Yeah, absolutely. 4 is when we dip down below what we call the abyss. We're getting outside of the supernal triad, the archetypical world, down into the
mind.
More the mind, the mental world. 4 is growth and expansion, just as a, being that next step.
Stability and foundation. Like you have 4 kind of pillars. That's how I think of like foundation for 4.
Yeah, absolutely. 4 pillars, a square being a really stable figure. It's also, when we think about like gods and things like that, it's a Jupiter. It's the demiurge, if you want to get Gnostic with it. It's like
the god that thinks it's God.
Yeah, the god that thinks it's God, because it doesn't know about anything above the abyss as far as it's concerned. And as far as we're concerned, it is God, because it's like the highest thing that we can perceive from here. And then 5, you're saying, is like instability.
Yeah, it's where sort of like you think of like if Zeus or Jupiter is like the demiurge god that thinks it's God. It's like when Zeus gets a little crazy, and like there's some rupture, as like the thing that thinks it's God has to grapple with the fact that it's not, but it doesn't know. I don't know if that makes sense.
It doesn't have that full control, so it has to like try to exercise it. Yeah.
So I think, like you get the 5 of Cups is disappointment. I think 5 of Swords is strife.
Sounds about right.
There's like conflicts. There's like kind of a boiling point. And then we move into 6s is kind of where you get a little bit of resolution.
Yeah.
6s is kind of like you've conquered or you've moved past that conflict. There's victory. There's the 6 of Cups is, I think, nostalgia in some decks, or
it's happiness in the Thoth deck, I believe, or pleasure.
It's like it's sort of like a pleasure that comes from, again, as you're descending, from finding that like resolution after the conflict. Is how I think of it.
Totally. It is absolutely the colors of the sunset. I believe it is the sun in Scorpio. So it's like,
It's very rosy.
yeah, very rosy. I like to think of the sixes kind of as like loosely party cards, like because they're very solar. Like the sun's energy is in there, just like I think of the sun as just like a very Dionysian character. It's just like, hey, I'm here. Let's fucking do it.
Let's have a good time.
Let's have a good time. Like I'm in control of everything. I got this handled. Like I'm harmonizing. It's very harmonious. Although I guess 7 is really where harmony comes into play for a lot of. I don't know. I think of 7 and Netzach as like harmonious. Like harmony is one of the things that I associate with it.
I think of the 7s a little differently. I think of them as it's sort of like a card of like delusions for at least cups. I think of the 7 of cups as like you're sort of like riding this wave at this point of like conflict and stability. And the 7 is kind of where you start to dip back into, like I think for the Thoth, it's starting to describe as like a little bit too tipsy.
Oh yeah.
Like you're starting to get a little bit sauced
Oh,
on like
yeah.
the good feelings.
Yeah, like you're getting close to puking for the evening. It's time to boot and maybe rally afterward, but you probably shouldn't.
Because I think is it Venus and Netzach if we get into the astrology more?
Yeah, it's I believe it's in Netzach, and I believe it is also Venus in Scorpio, so it's like double Venus energy.
Indulgence,
Super
decadence.
indulgence.
Yeah.
And then like in Scorpio where we're indulging in like really like
Base.
dark
Yeah.
bass, sex, drugs,
Rock and roll.
sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Yeah, that is what the 7 of Cups is. It's very much sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Which it's needed. There's a reason that card exists. But
Filing cabinet for the universe.
yeah, exactly. In I really like in the Lon Milo Duquette deck, the Terror of Ceremonial Magic. In the 7 of Cups, each of the cups is a martini glass or a martini.
Yeah. I think that's what I was thinking of in the Lon Milo Duquette. I'm like flipping through because the 7 of Cups, really the imagery of having had too much is really compelling to me.
It's good in the Thoth deck too. It's very
Yeah.
like sludgy and like sewagey and it's giving like 90s Toxic Avenger.
Oh yeah. And then for discs, it actually is just called failure.
Failure. Yep, that makes sense.
So that's like the lowest, like discs as the most material. You really are feeling the sludge, and it's very dark and very heavy.
And then I think for. Oh no, I was thinking back to 5s. We'll ditch that. Yeah, dark and heavy in the discs.
So like starting to dip back into the sludge after the celebration from the 6s, and then we move to 8s.
The 8s, which I don't think I've gotten a solid theme for the 8s yet. Let's reflect on it a little bit. I know the 8 of Cups is indolence. That's the one where someone's just like walking away from some cups that they were stacking. I think they were like stacking some cups, and then there's a couple on the ground that they like spilled, and we're just like, fuck it.
Yeah, it's indolence for Thoth, and it's quoted as the very apex of unpleasantness. So it's not exactly a one card back and forth kind of like dip. I do think of it as kind of this riding once we get into the higher cards. The descent into matter is kind of this like little bit of a roller coaster. So we have the indolence, and then for swords, it's called interference. So I think of, I don't know if I have a good like overarching theme for what the 8s are, because the 8, the even number, I think of as like, it's almost like the stability of the 4s has kind of become oppressive. So you have the mind has become, rather than maybe like a stable force, the 8 is like interference, like you're starting to be too in your head. I think, the 8 of Swords is like a very like trapped like energy to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we've got the 8 of Wands.
Yeah, that is swiftness.
Swiftness. That one, that's where my Venus lies, is in that card.
Mercury and Sagittarius.
Yeah. And that one has, I think, some resonance to it because it's an 8, it's Mercury in an 8, and Sagittarius is kind of being mutable, is more open to what they have. But I also don't have a solid understanding of this card either, despite it being like in my chart. In the Rider Waite, I know it's it's just wands flying through space. That's what it is in a lot of decks. And then the Thoth, it's kind of the like chaos magic star with like some rainbows and thunderbolts around it. And I think of it as just like kind of like the mind being open and free, like Sagittarius being a very like heady intellectual sign, along with Mercury and Hode just kind of like I think of it as like a college professor, like a young college professor who's like really into their subject, just like going wild on it.
Yeah, I love that. The way that Lon Milo Duquette describes it is this card is like two people who have had too much coffee who stay up all night talking simultaneously. A lot may be said, a lot may be learned, but inevitably they are both going to crash. So it's a very pretty card, and I think it like speaks really well to the fact that like it's not going to be like the tarot is not this static like it's a good card, it's a bad card, or the 8s are good or the 8s are bad, because like it is like a really like I have felt that energy of like too much coffee, like in the zone, up all night, like you're going, like that can be like really beautiful and exciting.
Feels
but like
so good.
Yeah, it feels so good. And then like eventually you will have to come down from that.
Yep. There's the next day of like, fuck, I didn't sleep at all last night. I can't do anything. Which gives us the 9 of discs or 9 of wands, which what is that? The 9 of wands.
9 of wands. So if we're sticking with wands, 9 of wands is strength.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, again, it's not this like back and forth, good, bad, but like what do you think of as the
strength to go on with your day.
Yes.
After staying up all night drinking coffee. That's kind of what I think of that one in particular. But yeah, let's talk about the 9s in general.
It's like almost completion, I guess.
It's almost completion, but it's also like it almost is always unstable, except for pretty much in the discs and then maybe the cups. But yeah, the 9s are very moody because they're in Yesod, which is the sphere of the moon around emotions, kind of like primal stirrings. When I think of the 9s, the first one that I always think of is the 9 of Swords, which is the person sitting up in bed after a nightmare. This is when thoughts have like influenced the emotions to the point of like becoming a terror. Like when you have 9 swords like spinning around you, you're probably going to get cut. But yeah, that first thing comes to mind is that 9 of swords. And then the 9 of wands is also kind of cumbersome, I believe. I don't remember.
Strength, but like you don't always want to have to be strong.
Yeah.
Because it's still kind of that descending. It's like almost there. But you're.
And then what do we have for cups?
I think 9 of cups was happiness, and I think was it the 10 of cups was
10 of cups
we did
was
recently.
what we did, yeah.
So 10 of cups we talked a lot about, and that was like the happy family. There's like a completion. 9 of cups in the Thoth is happiness. So.
And that's 9 in a watery sphere too, or that's cups in a watery sphere.
Yeah.
So it's got some resonance to it. It's not always unstable. And then we did the wands.
Discs is gain.
Yeah. So when we get lower in the tree of life and closer to the realm of the material world, the higher numbers are more resonant. And then, 10 of discs being like completion. I think is it just completion?
10 of discs in Thoth is wealth.
Wealth, that's right.
And
So
it's like the lowest. So it's like the highest card is like the most descended in the suit that is the most material. So it's thought that like the 10 of discs wealth is like you've come all the way into material reality, and then it has no choice but to like devolve into kind of like to cycle back again.
Yeah. And then, for a lot of the other cards, 10s don't bode as well because we're talking about bringing either a higher element down into the dense vibration of Earth, or, that would be when it doesn't bode well, typically,
so
right?
10 of Wands, our next one is oppression.
Yeah.
10 of Swords, I think is cruelty.
Yeah, that's cruelty. That's typically represented by a body on the ground with like 10 swords sticking out of it. It's overkill. That's usually how I think of that card. Yeah. I think that does a pretty good job of going through the numbers. We did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So it's like the arc of moving through it's kind of they're all their own little mini journeys, and then moving into the next suit.
Yeah, and that's something I've actually gotten into a little more recently, is looking at the each of the suits cards next to each other and kind of letting those tell a story. I think the Wands has a pretty tangible story to tell, especially like when we get around the 5, 6, 7, 5 through 10 is pretty tangible story. I think you could maybe be a little looser with the ace through 4, but there's kind of a narrative happening with the 6. The 5 is a bunch of people like fighting with swords. The 6 is kind of someone victorious from that fight. The 7
is walking. Is that the walking away one?
I think the 7 is the walking away one. And then I know 9 is when they've like kind of been defeated. 10 just being overburdened, walking away with all of those wands that they were fighting with. But yeah, that's another fun way to look at it, is to kind of connect the cards around and see how they sing to each other, so to speak.
They do sing to each other.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. That's not normally how I talk.
So poetic.
But like, I was looking the other day at like what the cards surrounding Tiferet have in common. There's those connections, all the cards that connect
to the heart center.
Exactly, yeah. We have, I think it's death, justice, art or temperance, the devil, and the hermit. And there's a lot of different ways that those connect, both kind of graphically and on an esoteric sense. Like, I think I got kind of weird and woo-woo with connecting death and justice. Like, I drew a connection with those ones that I hadn't before.
Tell me about it in one moment.
Oh, yeah. That's good. It gives me some time to look it up.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is weird. And kind of a good example of, like, magical thinking. I'm interested to actually see what you think about this, because it's kind of out there. But I was kind of meditating. So this was on a Friday.
It was a Friday.
I was thinking about Venus. I took a bath with like some Venus salts from this shop. Doing a little Venus thing. I listened to Phoebe Bridgers because she's kind of like a manifestation of Hathor for me. Where do I bring things in? So I was thinking about Venus, and like kind of like thinking about like the sexual aspect of that card, like the sensuality of it, which made me think of death. Like death card is like the sex card kind of for me. And there's a lot of things tied back to that, but death, sex.
The little death.
Exactly. Yeah. And then also, we'll talk about it more when we get into the death card. But death being a sexy sex card, And it also is also the path between Netzach, which is related to Venus and loveliness and all that, and then 6, the sun. So when we think about that, it's like sex being kind of like a path to enlightenment up that channel. And either way you travel, it's a death. Like when you, I mean, I've had like orgasms before where like I felt like my chest like opening up like a flower. That being a kind of death, changing from one thing into another, and then going the opposite way, kind of descending down, closing that flower is also a death. So either way you go between 7 and 6, it's death. Also because that's crossing the veil of Paraket, which is another invisible kind of delineation that we have in our consciousness.
The lower veil?
Yeah. So our mind being like 9, 8, and 7, like our sensibility, our logic, and our impulses. And then the higher mind, kind of your soul consciousness being in 6. So there's like a little delineation there from, the lay person to the adept. That's the big difference. So it's a death. You're crossing a boundary. And then if we're going to go further than that, we go up the tree via the route of adjustment or justice, which is Libra, also related to Venus. And then justice and balance are kind of representative as a way to deal with the stirrings of 5. That's where it connects to the 6, Tiferet. So again, justice being the connection between 5 and 6. And if you look at it, it's like a straight line between the two that kind of goes diagonal across the tree of life. And this relates to I have this concept of like the divine feminine staying relatively intact down the tree of life, like 7 and 3, despite like not having a ton in common numerologically, are still like really resonant with each other. And then I see this as being present in the name of Babylon. Babylon being 7 letters, being representative of the sphere of 3, and then having a value of 13, which is Scorpio. It's also what happens when you get 6 plus 7, which is where Scorpio or death being 13, where 6 and 7 unite, has an actual value of 13 in this case. Which to put all those little pieces together, just kind of is, I guess, an affirmation of that divine feminine staying intact down the tree of life.
So death as a path for like feminine realization, with that?
Yeah. Death being ruled over by that same principle.
Yes.
The same kind of energy. I guess what would be like Shakti, to think of like that, or like the
void.
Yeah. One of this, like that, feminine energy serpent of the Kundalini. And then kind of in a reversal of roles, the masculine kind of being an environment in which that takes place. Whereas typically we have Nui being the environment in which Hadi the masculine exists in, it kind of flips out in that way.
Yeah, I was always been intrigued by that kind of flipped depiction of like masculine and feminine, and I always like am delighted by it because because it's the idea that so Western esotericism knew as the environment, the sort of feminine void into which like masculine projective reality exists, and then in I guess a more Eastern take, Shakti is the kind of writing that happens in the masculine void. I guess it's like the projective, like the dancing, I think is how I've heard it described, of like it's the open space into which like the projective is seen as like a feminine force of creation in that context.
Yeah, I think Shakti literally means power. Yeah. So I feel like reflections are always confirmations in a way. Like if something's reflected, that means that like
the reverse is also true.
Yeah, the reverse is also true, and that means that like the whole has a truth to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, all that from my journal ramblings on that. But that's kind of a good example of the weird shit that happens when you get into this and the lines that your mind will draw and try to find, and that it ends up showing you. Like I had no idea. I never thought about how the gematria of Babylon was like 13. I was, took it at face value. Oh yeah, it's 7 letters. It represents 7. But like 13 being a magical number has always been an intriguing concept to me.
And the number of death in this case, yeah.
Yeah. What else could we get into?
Yeah, I'm ruminating on this like profound exploration that you've now presented on Babylon and death.
We can definitely talk about that more. Friday the 13th is a fun
is it
concept. No, it's just something that's a concept in the Western world that people are afraid of, but I think is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
But Friday being Venus's day, Viernes, and then 13 being that magical number, which I think represents the divine feminine, and that's probably why it's so taboo, being that it's the Valley of Babylon. There's been a few other correspondences with 13 that I've found in the past that kind of tie to that as well. But I've forgotten them at this point. 13 witches to a coven being an easy one.
One thing we could talk about is court cards.
We didn't talk about the court cards too much. No, let's get into that. We talked about the aces, which not really a court card. That's a number card, I guess.
Yeah, it's a number card. And then in the Thoth lineage, it's kind of thought of that the ace contains all the cards of that suit, which is, I guess, like its own, that could be like its own whole thing. But yeah, so the court cards are like, I think typically seen as personifying people because they are personified as like images of people in the deck. In the Rider Waite, they're the king, queen, often like prince and princess, or actually no, it's page and knight.
Yeah,
there's
king, queen, knight, page.
There's a lot of variation, I think, in when people do like different variations in the deck. Sometimes these are the names that change. But yeah, page and knight. In the Thoth, it is prince and princess, and I think Crowley had a very particular reason for why he did prince and princess.
Well, what I thought was kind of interesting is why he had knight instead of king.
Yeah, because he thought he was sexier.
Yeah, he thought the knight was sexier. He was like, the queen's not going to want this old king. She wants like the sexy young knight. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was funny. And then I think the prince and the princess kind of tie back to the prince I think that's partly just to bring the royalty back to it. Mm-hmm. And then it's also the I Ching tying back to it, which in the I Ching there's a concept of daughter and son. There's like father, there's like heavenly father. The things are like either heavenly or earthly, and then they're either like a mother, father, son, or daughter. The I Ching is, I would love to get into more and learn. It's very complex. I have not been able to crack that egg
Yeah,
yet.
I know very little about the I Ching.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's to resonate with the I Ching a little bit more, and also like tie in more of the hermetic gender to things.
Yeah, so in the hermetic, because I think the core cards are where I think there's the most interesting like ideological divergence in the Thoth with the Rider Waite. Like the Rider Waite to me always seemed rather straightforward. Like the king is like a father archetype. It's like a leader, like an authority figure. It's like your own inner authority. Queen, similar, but like feminine intuition, like kind of high priestess, I think of energy, but again, specific to the suits. And then the knight I think of as like messenger energy. It's kind of like a more impulsive, like masculine, like driving force, I guess, like in a very basic sense. And then the page is sort of like new ideas. It's like a kind of youthful energy is kind of basically how I see them in the Rider Waite. Versus in the Thoth, it has a much more like symbolically rich, I think, like narrative is the way I learned it, where it's like the sleeping. There is no king in the Thoth because again, it's not sexy enough to Crowley.
It's not sexy enough.
So the king is, I think, sleeping. Like the king is sleeping, and the queen like wants some, and like the knight is like again this like energy of like there's like this seductive thing happening with the queen and the knight, and then that like births the prince and the princess. And the prince is sort of the like HGA, like guardian angel figure of like higher consciousness that we all as humans are like the earthly princess who has like forgotten our like holy spiritual lineage. So we're sort of like the sleeping princess waiting for our prince, which is like our consciousness, our magical identity, to like find us and awaken us, and we join in union. And then it sort of creates this again like sleeping, waking love union cycle is kind of how like Crowley has it set up. So like the cards in the Thoth are sort of like along those lines a little bit more than just like father mother archetypes is kind of how I learned it.
Yeah, that resonates with my understanding of it too. Did you ever read or listen to?
I only know it insofar as
The Waking World. I think is what it was called.
I think Alon Milo Duquette references it in the Thoth Tarot Guide.
Okay.
And so that's how I like. That's how I've heard of it, but I haven't actually read the full story.
Gotcha. It's basically that, what you were just talking about, but like fleshed out a little bit more. And then also there's, it goes through all of the different paths of the Tree of Life. So each of the cards has like imagery associated with it. And then each of the spheres they kind of land in have a imagery associated with them too. So it's cool. It's a cool meditation. But yeah. I definitely, I like that about the Thoth deck and the Thoth imagery, that it kind of has this like continuous cycle to it. You know, when you marry your prince, your HGA, you then become the queen. The HGA becomes the knight. And then, or does the HGA become the sleeping king and then you're the knight and the queen? That probably.
There's an interesting, like, I think like in the idea of cycling, there's like an interesting like reminder in itself about like forgetting and like the nature of like like being human is like forgetting. Like you're going to have potentially this like initial contact with like magical consciousness of like awakening, and then journeying with that knowledge. And then at what point do you potentially
drink from the river Styx?
Exactly. Yeah. And potentially like forget, fall asleep, like lose contact with that higher knowing as like an inevitable part of like the human experience, where like your material reality may not have changed drastically, but you've lost some sort of like spiritual strength that allows you the tools to like navigate it as well, which I think is kind of like the crashing after the like the high, if you've had like the getting high on magic, where you like I don't know, there's like a cycle of like disenchantment, I think.
Totally.
That might encompass in that kind of cycle.
I think that's a good way to put it. I know a lot of people who have gone far down the path of magic have kind of come out the other end of it with, you know, having a much more practical worldview. Like, I forget who I was listening to, but they talked about it as people who've like cured themselves of magic.
Yeah.
I think of right now Damien Eccles, who we were talking about previously on the podcast, and has been kind of a figure both of us have learned from. His Instagram's all martial arts now. Like, he doesn't do a lot of magic stuff anymore, and has been like super focused on martial arts, which is in itself like a practical version of some of the disciplines and things that you learn in magic. It's another way to like study correspondences and like ways to direct energy and work with it.
Yeah, that's a really I think I remembered that he was doing more focus on martial arts, but the phrase of like curing oneself of magic feels very heartening to me, because like it's like sort of like my study of magic feels similar to like I come from an academic background, and there's sort of this like feeling of like I put so much energy and effort into like learning this, like I have to like use it and like hold on to it. And at some point, I think especially, well, with anything in life, this is true, but like I think magic specifically contains like either whether explicit or like intuitive, like a sense of like you can learn this to a point where even if you forget, you can't go back. Like you can learn it to an extent where it like is alive in you, and you won't like lose that. So you can go do other stuff and still just be like, yeah, I know this is all like a fractal holographic reality, and I'm just going to go do martial arts about it.
Totally.
Like, or go do literally anything. And like, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be proving anything through it. Like, you can still know about tarot and esoteric stuff and like do rituals and not have like, I guess like the imposter syndrome about it. Like, you're still magical as fuck. Like, inherently, like everyone, even people who've never heard of this before, like that's the inherent reality of it, is like we're all in this soup together, and like learning about it is a tool for navigating it, but you're in it whether you are actively doing anything about it or not.
Totally. Yeah. I think we touched on that in the last episode a little bit too, about how like making a sandwich is magic.
Yep.
But yeah, that's what we're here to do, is still, I mean, depending on, you know, your view of, I guess, what ontology or why we exist.
Yeah.
We're here to create. We are, you know, manifestations of a divine being that wanted to experience everything and like create. That's what it does, is create. And like us as a manifestation of that are also driven to create, which I think I got that from the artist's way. It's like you are
inherently a
creative being, like, and is that the one where they talk about God as like good orderly
direction?
Yeah, orderly direction. So
yeah,
we are God manifest in this world to create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of that could probably be a whole interesting. Like, I should do some free writing on that, because I feel like the artist's way and like conceptions of like Tifereth and like the holy guardian angel, I'm sure there's some interesting crossovers there about like the idea of like awakening and like rescuing your artist's child and like going to this place where, you know, you have agency, and like that's like a whole journey that the artist's way has a very practical and like specific lens about it being about art and creativity, and like the artist as your inner child. But like there's super like definitely parallels between like a magical path, which we touched on that, but like the creative will is there. I see
it as like it is like very art focused, but it's also like very spiritual in its approach to it.
Yeah.
And there's definitely some crossover there with parts work too,
for sure,
which is, I'll say it again, equally as woo woo.
Yeah. I mean, the
practical.
self I think of as like as the prince, as Tiferet, as the holy guard. Like you're accessing
The core self. Yeah.
the heart center, the C's, the compassion,
The
the
eight
courage, compassion, courage,
Curious.
creativity, curiosity. Yeah, I think there's 8 of them.
There's 8 of them, and I never remember any of them, but you did a good job. Yeah, I was thinking about those 8 C's as like an invocation. Like just saying the 8 C's like makes me kind of tune into that part of myself. Yeah, that's so fucking woo-woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely some magic to internal family systems. But yeah, like also on curing oneself of magic, like I think that's like an inevitable path for a lot of people. And I think I like to hope that we get to like come back into it, like forget. 'Cause I feel like where I've gone is like I've for a long time was like, oh yeah, my magic is just like living life. And I'm like what you were saying, keeping all these things in the back of my mind while I was just living life. But I think without practice, I forgot a lot of them. So I feel like right now I'm coming back to a place of practicing again and re-engaging with it. But I also don't feel a need to engage with magic to like the point where I had when I was like really into manifesting stuff and doing like sigil magic, which like we did do a ritual for this podcast to manifest a few things. But I feel like it was a lot more high-minded than like, I don't think we talked about material success in that ritual at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the curing oneself of magic is like once you know what's like really important to you, like material success follows. Like that's a given. So you don't really need to be like, we're going to make a lot of money. We just need to be like, we know what we care about. Like it'll come.
Yeah, but we would like to. So if you want to subscribe to our yet to exist Patreon.
Yeah, and there'll be magical feet pics or something.
Yeah, feet pics will happen one day.
You can hear us eating corn chip and doing our ritual reflection.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's some extra content on the way if we do decide to go down the Patreon route.
I think I dropped guacamole in my boobs or something.
That sounds about right, yeah. There was a moment of food on Lux's boobs. And also cocktails. There were cocktails being made during the
post-ritual pillow talk. So yeah, feel free to support our material success.
All that to say, give us your money, please.
Yeah, make it worth your while.
Anything else we want to talk about around the tarot in general?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what are some good closing thoughts to round this out. We talked about court cards and archetypes and talked about the minor arcana and the numerology 1 through 10. We talked about the major arcana. We didn't mention our interesting revelation that we had before we started recording, which is that in the Thoth, the major arcana are called Atu. Mm-hmm. Which the major arcana are also referred to as the trump cards because they're like the triumph. They sort of like take place over everything else. And Atu comes from the French, like Atu, like everything of everything. So that was an interesting little language moment.
Yeah. Also worth noting that's where the name of tarot and the idea of trumps come from is tarocchi. The original Italian name means triumphs or trumps. So yeah, that was a fun little thing to chat about. All right, so yeah, I think we've got this one in the bag. Looking forward to chatting with you folks next time as we get into the 10 of Wands, Prescience.
Woohoo.
Yeah, super stoked for that one. But yeah, we really look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, you can find us and let us know if you have any questions, things you want us to talk about. We can find us on Blue Sky at The Feral Tarot and on Instagram.
As The Feral Tarot. You can also drop us a line on our email, theferaltarotpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to engage with you, hear your feedback, all that good stuff. We're going to be plan on releasing episodes every other week going forward. The first couple you saw were right after one after another. But yeah, going forward, we should be getting these out to you every other week. So keep an eye on with that. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcast medium. Other than that, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, I'm Nemo Blank.
And I'm Lux Ferros. Stay feral, friends.